Greetings, friends, and welcome to another episode of The Bible Yogi. I'm your host, Douglas Roberts, and today we are going to get through part 3 of the story of Jacob. And last we were talking about Jacob. He was working for his father-in-law, Laban, and they got to the point where Jacob is trying to negotiate his exit and to return back to the land of Canaan so he can see Isaac before he dies, and his father. And Jacob and Laban make a deal that Jacob can take all of these speckled and striped cattle, camels, sheep and goats from the flocks, and that'll be his wages. And so Jacob employs hazel rods and takes all of the speckled sheep. And here we go. Here's a nice little Bing image that shows Jacob making off with all of these speckled, spotted sheep. Anyway, I thought that came out pretty good. But how did this happen? Well, Jacob took him rods of green poplar and of the hazel and chestnut tree, and pilled white strakes in them, and made the white appear which was in the rods. Pilled, of course, meaning peeled. Strakes, meaning, stripes, basically. And he set the rods which he had pilled before the flocks, in the gutters and the watering troughs when the flocks came to drink, that they should conceive when they came to drink. This is odd, and this is not backed by any kind of science. So Jacob is basically just doing something, and this is causing all these flocks, as we see in verse 39, and the flocks conceived before the rods and brought forth cattle, ring-straked, speckled, and spotted. Ta-da! It worked. Nobody knows why. We'll find out in a few chapters, or in a few verses. And Jacob did separate the lambs, and set the faces of the flocks toward the ring-straked, and all the brown in the flock of Laban. And he put his own flocks by themselves, and put them not into Laban's cattle. And it came to pass, whensoever the stronger cattle did conceive, that Jacob laid the rods before the eyes of the cattle in the gutters, that they might conceive among the rods. But when the cattle were feeble, weak, he put them not in, so the feebler were Laban's, and the stronger Jacob's. And the man increased exceedingly, and had much cattle, and maidservants, and menservants, and camels, and asses. Those camels are quite obligatory in this part of the book of Genesis. Jacob is guided by a dream from God. Genesis chapter 31, verses 1 through 9. And Jacob heard the words of Laban's sons, saying, Jacob hath taken away all that was our father's, and of that which was our father's hath he gotten all the glory. So they recognize this little ruse that Jacob is doing is working. He's getting a much nicer flock full of strong cattle. And Jacob beheld the countenance of Laban, and behold, it was not toward him as before. In other words, Laban realizes that the gig is up. Jacob is no longer the fool that Laban originally took him for. If you remember, he basically first he gives him Leah. Oh, yeah, it's not the custom of our people to give the younger daughter away before the older. Information that would have been nice to have sometime in the previous 7 years he was working for Laban, but no, kind of kept that part a secret from him, because Laban recognized that Jacob is a very, very good person. It doesn't dawn on him that someone would lie to him, because he's a pure man. He's a good guy in the sight of God. And the Lord said unto Jacob, Return unto the land of thy fathers and to thy kindred, and I will be with thee. And Jacob sent and called Rachel and Leah to the field unto his flock, and said unto them, in other words, away from, Laban and his family, and said unto them, I see your father's countenance, that it is not toward me as before, but the God of my father hath been with me. And you know that with all my power I have served your father. And your father hath deceived me and changed my wages 10 times, but God suffered him not to hurt me. Now check this out. This is why, and well, I don't know, but this is why, but this is certainly part of the dynamic. Jacob is a really, really good guy. And even though he's been deceived, and changed his wages 10 times, and God suffered him not to hurt me, Jacob just endured it all. And if he said, thus, the speckled shall be thy wages, then all the cattle bear speckled. What could I do? And, he didn't notice he's not mentioning the rods and stuff, but hang on. And if he said, thus, the ring straked shall be thy hire, then bear all the cattle ring straked. What could I do? Thus God hath taken away the cattle of your father and given them to me. So it's like, well, exactly. Don't you love it? It's like, how would you like to make that deal? You're Laban and you think, cattle, they only come up with ring-straked cattle. What, 1 in every 20 cattle that's born? Sure, you get 1 out of 20, Then all of a sudden, they're all giving these ring-straked, calves. It's like, darn. You're just trying to rip the guy off, right? And it's not working. And it came to pass at the time that the cattle conceived, that I lifted up mine eyes and saw in a dream, and behold, the rams which leaped upon the cattle were ring-straked, speckled, and gristled. And I had to go look that up because I didn't know what grizzled meant. And truthfully, it's weird because these Old English words, they don't appear in today's Bible, today's dictionaries anymore. And that's kind of annoying. It just goes to show you that people aren't reading the King James version of the Bible anymore. But fortunately for all of us, I have a 70-year-old dictionary right here when people still were reading the King James. And it does have, it actually doesn't have that word. So where does word come from? Well, fortunately, we have multiple translations, as I went over in earlier episodes. And this word gristled is actually the word grizzled with a different spelling. And what does grizzled mean? It means gray. So in other words, it's another rare color of cattle. They don't usually come out gray. And the angel of God spake unto me, saying, Jacob. And I said, Here am I. And he said, Lift up thine eyes, and see, all the rams which leap upon the cattle are ring-straked, speckled, and grizzled. For I have seen all that Laban doeth unto thee. I am the God of Bethel, where thou anointest the pillar. Remember, he dumped the oil on the pillar when he crossed over the river to go in to see Laban. And where thou vowedst a vow unto me, now arise. Aha, that's important. We can't just, leap over that. Jacob made a vow, which is a solemn promise unto God that he would follow God with all of his heart. And apparently, up till now, he has stuck with it, really good. So that's why, you get these visits from God and angels, right? You set your heart, you make vows. Now arise, get thee out from this land and return unto the land of thy kindred. And Rachel and Leah answered and said unto him, Is there yet any portion or inheritance for us in our father's house? Are we not counted of him as strangers? For he hath sold us, and hath quite devoured also our money. So they see the injustice that Laban has done. For all the riches which God hath taken from our father, that is ours and our children's. And now whatsoever God hath said unto thee, do. Then Jacob rose up and set his sons and his wives upon the obligatory camels, and he carried away all his cattle and all his goods which he had gotten, the cattle of his getting which he had gotten in Padan Aram, for to go to Isaac his father in the land of Canaan. Why not read the King James? You don't get beautiful scriptures like that in modern versions. They had a sense of poetry, It's good stuff. Rachel steals the gods, and Laban chases Jacob. What is going on here, right? And Laban went to shear his sheep, and Rachel had stolen the images that were her father's. What in the world? And Jacob stole away unawares to Laban the Syrian. Notice how the translators did that little play on words there. In that he told him not that he fled. So he fled with all that he had, and he rose up and passed over the river, and set his face toward the Mount Gilead. And it was told Laban on the third day that Jacob had fled. You know, you just picture the wide open expanse of land that they had to live on with all these cattle and stuff. It wasn't obvious that Jacob had fled because, you know, they're all spread out anyway. So, now, but after 3 days, they figured it out. And Laban took his brethren with him and pursued Jacob. After 7 days' journey, they overtook him in the Mount Gilead. But God came to Laban the Syrian in a dream by night and said unto him, Take heed that thou speak not to Jacob either good or bad. So a little bit of an intervention, if you will, from God Almighty himself. You know you're screwing up big time if God appears to you and says, watch yourself. So I can imagine that put the fear of God into Laban. And Laban said to Jacob, What hast thou done, that thou hast stolen away unawares to me, and carried away my daughters as captives taken with the sword? Wherefore didst thou flee away secretly, and steal away from me, and didst not tell me that I might have sent thee away with mirth, with songs, with tabret, and with harp? And hast not suffered me to kiss my sons and my daughters. Thou hast done foolishly in so doing. It is in the power of my hand to do you hurt, but the God of your fathers spake unto me yesternight, saying, Take thou heed that thou speakest not to Jacob either good or bad. And now, though thou wouldest needs be gone, because thou sore longest after thy father's house. Now he's being all understanding. And he gets to the point. Yet wherefore hast thou stolen my gods? And Jacob answered and said to Laban, Because I was afraid. Answers the first question first. Because I was afraid. And I said, Peradventure, perhaps, thou wouldest take it by force, thy daughters from me. You know, why not? You've ripped me off 10 times already, right? So who knows? Laban, you've shown yourself to be completely untrustworthy. I would not expect you to say, Oh, let's send you off with songs and mirth and tabret and harp. I would expect you to steal your daughters from me and all the cattle I worked for. That's what I expected, you know. But with whomsoever thou findest thy gods, let him not live before thy brethren. Discern thou what is thine with me, and take it with thee. For Jacob knew not that Rachel had stolen them. What is going on? Well, back in the day, people who were not Hebrews, who did not worship the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, you know, the God, the Creator, they didn't have faith. So they made these little idols of gold and jewels and whatnot, you know, and who knows? They just fashioned these weird little gods, but they put a lot of money into them. They were valuable because they had gold and emeralds and such. So Rachel saying, you know, I'll take the most valuable thing from the house and steal it. Why not, right? Let's see if she gets away with this. Oh, I gave it away. Rachel successfully hides the gods from Laban. Now, how does she do that? That's the question. Laban is busy searching everything. Now, let me tell you something. When you try to get Bing Image Creator to say, create an image of Rachel sitting in a saddle with golden idols, it gets way too confused. And the stuff it was coming up with, you know, oftentimes it would say, the images I just created are not safe, you know. So I'm like, okay. So they finally came up with this. And I was, well, that's good enough. She's sitting on the ground. She's got a cute cat. It looks like a tiger. I don't know why, but there it is. And Laban went into Jacob's tent and into Leah's tent and into the two maidservants' tents, Zilpah and Bilhah, if you remember them. But he found them not, the images, the idols, the golden statues. Then he went out of Leah's tent and entered into Rachel's tent, where we know that the idols are in there. Now Rachel had taken the images and put them in the camel's furniture, saddle, basically, and sat upon them. And Laban searched all the tent, but found them not. And she said to her father, Let it not displease my lord, that I cannot rise up before thee, for the custom of women is upon me. Her period. And he searched, but found not the images. So she fooled him. And Jacob was wroth and chode with Laban. Huh? Well, wroth is angry, and chode. What is chode? Chode is the past tense of the verb to chide, which basically is a really kind word here. You can imagine how mad Jacob is, right? If it says so, and I explained that the Bible very rarely gives any kind of emotional leading like this. And yet here's an instance. So he is definitely mad. Chode is past tense of to scold, as though you're scolding a child. So it's a very mild rebuke, actually. So he's fuming, but he still holds his temper really well. And Jacob answered and said to Laban, what is my trespass? What is my sin that thou hast so hotly pursued me? Whereas thou hast searched all my stuff, and hast thou found all of thy household stuff? Set it here before my brethren and thy brethren, that they may judge betwixt us both. Between us. Hope you got that word figured out by now. To betwixt, between us. This 20 years have I been with thee. Thy ewes and thy she-goats have not cast their young, meaning they haven't miscarried, they haven't given birth to dead, calves and kids and whatnot. And the rams of thy flock have I not eaten. That which was torn of beasts I brought not unto thee, I bear the loss of it. Of my hand didst thou require it, whether stolen by day or stolen by night. Thus I was in the day that drought consumed me, and the frost by night, and my sleep departed from my eyes. Thus I have been 20 years in thy house. I served thee 14 years for thy 2 daughters, and 6 years for thy cattle, and thou hast changed my wages 10 times. Except the God of my father, the God of Abraham, and the fear of Isaac had been with me, surely thou hadst sent me away now empty. See? God hath seen mine affliction with the labor of my hands and rebuked thee yesternight. Now let's put all this in perspective. Jacob had made the vow to God that he would follow God, and look what that meant. It meant that he was out there day and night watching this flock, trying to keep the beasts away from eating it, and when they did, he took the loss if they got a speckled sheep or whatever, or a non-speckled sheep, then Jacob would restore one to him, to Laban, so that he took the loss. And he was out there at night. He was, fighting off the thieves, fighting off the beasts. He was freezing. He was wet. He endured lots of hardship, and he did it without complaint. And now he's simply telling Laban how loyal he was, how faithful he was, and how faithful he served him. And then he says, basically, if God hadn't stepped up and warned you in a dream, who knows what you would have done? And Laban answered and said unto Jacob, these daughters are my daughters. The guy's still whining. And these children are my children. And these cattle are my cattle. Right? Well, technically they did come from your cattle, but you agreed to give them to me. And all that thou seest is mine. The gall, right? And what can I say to this day to these my daughters or to their children which they have borne? Now therefore come thou, and let us make a covenant, I and thou, and let it be a witness between me and thee. So finally, Laban sees the writing on the wall, basically. He finally understands that it didn't matter what had happened, that God was on the side of Jacob, and stop fighting. Stop, as it says in the New Testament, when Paul is on his way to Damascus, and he's there persecuting Christians, and the angel of the Lord, or actually I think it's God himself, stops him and says, why do you kick against the pricks? In other words, you're trying to, stop something that you're just going to hurt yourself, right? And Jacob took a stone and set it up for a pillar. And Jacob said unto his brethren, gather stones. And they took stones and made a heap. And there they did eat upon the heap. And Laban called it Jegasahadutha, but Jacob called it Gilead. And Laban said, this heap is a witness between me and this day, and me and thee this day. Therefore was the name of it called Gilead and Mizpah, for he said, the Lord watch between me and thee, and when we are absent from one another. I mean, it's really sounds like bona fide repentance a little bit there to me, about you guys. If thou shalt afflict my daughters, if thou shalt take other wives beside my daughters, no man is with us. See, God is witness betwixt me and thee. And Laban said to Jacob, behold this heap, and behold this pillar, which I have cast betwixt me and thee. This heap be witness, this pillar be witness, and I will not pass over this heap to thee, and thou shalt not pass over this heap unto the pillar unto me for harm. And Jacob offered sacrifice upon the mount, and called his brethren to eat bread, and they did eat bread, and tarried all night in the mount. And early in the morning Laban rose up, kissed his sons and daughters, and blessed them, and Laban departed and went back to his place. So after all that, Laban goes away empty-handed. Jacob has all the cattle, all the sheep, all the ring-straked and striped sheep, and the family idols. But however, now Jacob's approaching Edom, the land of Esau, and he prays for safety. And Jacob went on his way, and the angels of God met him. And when Jacob saw them, he said, this is God's host. And he called the name of that place Mahanaim. And Jacob sent messages before him to Esau. I don't want to glance over that too much, but the angels of God met him? This is like, just one little scripture. The angels of God met him. Moving along. I don't know about you, but I've never been, taking a trip and met by the angels of God. So this guy's pretty amazing, this Jacob guy. And Jacob sent messengers before him to Esau his brother unto the land of Seir, the country of Edom, red. And he commanded them, saying, thus shall you speak unto my lord Esau. Thy servant Jacob saith thus, I have sojourned with Laban, and stayed there until now, 20 years. I have oxen and asses and flocks, and men servants and women servants, and I sent to tell my lord that I may find grace in thy sight. And the messengers returned to Jacob, saying, we came to thy brother Esau, and also he cometh to meet me with 400 men. And Jacob was greatly afraid and distressed. You've seen what his grandfather Abraham could do with 400 men. He could take on 4 kingdoms, And he was greatly afraid and distressed. And he divided the people that was with him in the flocks and the herds and the camels into 2 bands, or 2 companies. And he said, if Esau come to the one company and smite it, then the other company which is left shall escape. And Jacob said, O God of my father Abraham, and God of my father Isaac, the Lord which saidst unto me, return unto thy country. You told me to go back, and to thy kindred, and I will deal well with thee. I am not worthy of the least of all these Murthies. After everything he's done, this is his attitude. I mean, he just was met by angels. And he says, I am not worthy of the least of all mercies. The man is amazing. How many of us complain about the slightest thing as though we deserved better? I mean, I know I've probably done that. Like, I don't deserve to be woken up at 4 a.m. by my stupid cats because they want to be fed. I get angry at that. And here's Jacob about to be met by his brother, who he expects wants to kill him. And he says, I'm not even worthy of the least of all mercies, and of all the truth which thou hast showed unto thy servant. For with my staff I passed over this Jordan, and now I've become 2 bands. So he's basically acknowledging that he had nothing except a walking stick when he went over the Jordan to go meet Laban and Rachel. But now he's got 2 giant companies of cattle and camels and everything, and servants. So he prays, deliver me, I pray thee, from the hand of my brother, from the hand of Esau, for I fear him, lest he will come and smite me, and the mother with the children. And thou saidst, I will surely do thee good, and make thee as the sand of the sea, which cannot be numbered for multitude. It's a very clear, concise prayer. Later, Jesus admonishes all his followers, do not be as the heathens, for they think they'll be heard for the repetition of words. But notice at this moment, even though the Bible is famous for repetition, here he's not. Here he's being very concise. Deliver me from the hand of my brother, because you said you would, Now this is fascinating. So what does Jacob do? And he lodged there that same night, and took that of which he came to his hand, a present for Esau his brother, 200 she-goats and 20 he-goats. They're going to breed a whole ton of goats after a while. 200 ewes and 20 rams, 30 milch camels with their colts. That milch meaning they're milking their colts. 40 kine, and those are dairy cows, and 10 bulls, 20 she asses, and 10 foals, which is young donkeys or young horses also. You can mean either one. In this sense, we can pretty much think it's 10 little asses. And he delivered them into the hand of his servants, every drove by themselves. So every, different kind of animal is in a little, pocket. And said unto his servants, pass over before me, and put a space betwixt drove and drove. And he commanded the foremost, saying, when Esau my brother meeteth thee, and asketh thee, saying, whose art thou? And whither goest thou? And whose are these before thee? Then thou shalt say, they be thy servant Jacob's. It is a present sent unto my lord Esau, and behold, he also is behind him. So just picture this. Jacob's setting this up, so he's going to get a nice present, another nice present, a nicer present, and on and on and on. So it doesn't spring it on him all at once. He's kind of getting as much grace or much favor as he can leverage out of these presents. And so he commanded the second and the third, and all that he followed, and all that followed the drove, saying, on this manner shall you speak unto Esau when you find him. And say ye moreover, behold, thy servant Jacob is behind us. For he said, I will appease him with the present that goeth before me, and afterward I will see his face. Peradventure he will accept of me. He so went the present over before him, and himself lodged that night with the company. And he rose up that night, and took his 2 wives and his 2 women servants and his 11 sons, remember Benjamin hasn't been born yet, and passed over the ford Jabbok. And he took them and sent them over the brook, and sent over all that he had. Genesis chapter 32, verses 24-32. Jacob wrestles with God. One of the more amazing stories in all the Old Testament. And there's a nice little picture. Jacob's got the angel right where he wants him. About to give him some what fors, right? He's wrestling with an angel. Most people, when they see an angel, they freak right out. Even in the Bible, it's like an angel shows up and they fall on their faces as if dead. And here's Jacob left alone, and there wrestled a man with him until the breaking of the day. Just casually wrestling with an angel. And anyway, the Bible tells us what's going on. And when he saw that he prevailed not against him, the angel touched the hollow of his thigh, and the hollow of Jacob's thigh was out of joint as he wrestled with him. And he said, let me go, for the day breaketh. And he said, I will not let thee go, except thou bless me. And he said unto him, what is thy name? And he said, Jacob. And he said, thy name shall be called no more Jacob, but Israel. Finally, after all this, we get his name changed. For as a prince thou hast power with God and with men, and hast prevailed. And Jacob asked him and said, tell me, I pray thee, thy name. And he said, wherefore, why is it that you doth ask me after my name? And he blessed him there. And Jacob called the name of the place Peniel, for I have seen God face to face, and my life is preserved. And as he passed over Penuel, the sun arose upon him, and he halted upon his thigh. Therefore the children of Israel eat not the sinew which he shrank, which is in the hollow of the thigh. So I said angel, the Bible says man, and then later on he says, I've seen God face to face. So, I leave it to you. Draw your own conclusions. It was certainly a divine being. Was it an actual physical manifestation of God himself? Well, if it wasn't, it was certainly a being that was imbued with the Spirit of God. So it was intense. But imagine that. Imagine you're praying so hard that God himself shows up, and your reaction is to jump on him and start wrestling around. And you ain't leaving until you bless me. That's how afraid he was of Esau, that he was going to jump on an angel or God himself and wrestle him. And this was the inspiration of Jordan Peterson's latest book, We Who Wrestle with God. And he uses it as a metaphor, but I believe it happened. I believe, something crazy spiritual, angel, God, manifestation of God. We've talked about Melchizedek, showing up and, the fourth man in the furnace with Daniel's in the book of Daniel. So it happens. And finally, let's see what happens. Now he's wrestled with God, and he got his name changed, and he's been blessed by God. And Jacob lifted up his eyes and looked. Behold, Esau came, and with him 400 men. And he divided the children unto Leah and unto Rachel and unto the two handmaidens. And he put the handmaidens and their children first, and Leah and then her children after, and Rachel and Joseph hindermost at the back. And he passed over unto them and bowed himself to the ground 7 times until he came near to his brother. So he is humble. And Esau ran to meet him and embraced him and fell on his neck and kissed him, and they wept. Hadn't seen the guy in 20 years. And this is the meeting. It's about as full of grace and goodwill as you can possibly, as he possibly could. And he lifted up his eyes and saw the women and the children and said, Who are those with thee? And he said, The children which God hath graciously given thy servant. More humility. And the handmaidens came near, they and their children, and they bowed themselves. And Leah also with the children came near, and they bowed themselves. And after that came Joseph near, and Rachel, and they bowed themselves. And he said, What meanest thou by all this drove which I met? And he said, These are to find grace in the sight of my Lord. And Esau said, I have enough, my brother. Keep that thou hast unto thyself. Now remember, I talked about when Jacob stole the blessing initially from Esau at the blessing of Isaac. Isaac did turn around and give Esau a pretty good blessing anyway. And lo and behold, that worked out too. I have enough, my brother. Keep that thou hast unto thyself. I mean, his 400 guys came with him. And Jacob said, Nay, I pray thee, if now I have found grace in thy sight, then receive my present at my hand. For therefore I have seen thy face, and though I have seen the face of God, and thou wast pleased with me, take, I pray thee, my blessing that is brought to thee, because God hath dealt graciously with me, and because I have enough. And he urged him, and he took it. And he said, Let us take our journey, and let us go, and I will go before thee. And he said unto them, My Lord knoweth that the children are tender, and the flocks and herds are young with me. And if men should overdrive them one day, all the flock will die. Let my Lord pray thee, pass over before thy servant, and I will lead on softly, according as the cattle that goeth before me, and the children are able to endure, until I come to my Lord unto Seir. And Esau said, Let me now leave with thee some of the folk that are with me. And he said, What needeth that? Let me find grace in the sight of my Lord. So Esau returned that day on his way to Seir. So things could not have worked out better. And Jacob journeyed to Succoth and built him a house and made booths for his cattle, like barns. Therefore the name of the place is called Succoth, which means booths. And Jacob came to Shalem, a city of Shechem, which is in the land of Canaan, and he came from Padan Aram, and pitched his tent before the city, and he bought a parcel of field, which he spread his tent at the hand of the children of Hamor, Shechem's father, for 100 pieces of money, and he erected there an altar and called it Eloheh Israel. My summary was missing. So here's the summary of the story of Jacob. Jacob was born second with a very hairy red twin brother Esau, who was born first. Esau gave his birthright to Jacob for a meal of stew. Certainly you remember the sod pottage, bit from earlier. Jacob subsequently steals his rightful blessing from Isaac with the help of his mom, Rebekah. Remember, he put on the goat skin on his arms and fooled Isaac, and Isaac was like, It's the voice of Jacob, but the wrists are Esau. Jacob flees to Padan Aram to see Laban because Esau is going to kill him. And so Jacob has the dream of the angels climbing the ladder, Jacob's ladder, the electronic device. Jacob meets Rachel, Laban's daughter. Laban tricks Jacob and gives him Leah for a wife, if you remember that. And what have you done? And the whole thing. Jacob works for 14 years for his wife, Leah and Rachel, and 6 more years for the cattle and flock. He fathers 12 boys who become the 12 tribes of Israel, even though we only covered 11 so far. Jacob uses hazelwood, poplar, and cedar twigs to produce strong speckled flocks, and you remember that. Jacob flees Laban in the middle of the night. Rachel steals Laban's gods. Laban chases Jacob and is warned by God to chill. Don't you do a darn thing to Jacob. A truce, a covenant is made between Jacob and Laban, so that all works out. Jacob returns to the land of Edom. Esau comes to meet him with 400 men. Jacob is scared out of his wits. Last he heard, Esau wanted to kill him, and he presumes that that's still the case. He literally wrestles with an angel, or God, and is named Israel. Esau accepts Jacob's present and receives him gladly. So let that be a lesson to all of us. Work hard, pray, rely on God, but work like he ain't going to do anything, and things will hopefully go well. Till next time.